So welcome everyone to Sunday Poetry. And today we are going to start playing with modern haiku. And as I mentioned in the newsletter, we'll be mostly using this book, the Haiku Anthology, edited by Cor Vanden Heuvel. If you don't have this book today, fine, no problem. But I would highly recommend, even aside from these sessions, this is really good. For the years that I taught at my Literature of Enlightenment class at Pingree School, I always did a haiku section, and it took me years of searching around for like the really great anthology. And as far as I'm concerned, this is it. I just actually last week, when I was writing my newsletter, I went on Amazon to check and make sure this was still available for y'all, and it is. And yes, there you go. And I noticed there a biography, a long autobiography of Cor Vanden Heuvel, which I read, and I hadn't known anything about him. And it turns out he's such a perfect, typical kind of, American haiku guy who, worked for a while. He bummed around in and out of colleges, and then was a cook, and then worked on ships, and just kind of perfect. And turns out he goes back to really the beginnings of American haiku. The people who were, the first in the late 40s and the early 50s, which include Jack Kerouac, who has some pieces in here, and some other names less familiar. And Cor Vanden Heuvel spent time hanging around with most of these people and was very active in, I'm not sure if he's still alive, but if he is, he's got to be pretty old, but he's been very active. I think he was the president of the American Haiku Confabulation or whatever it was. So he was kind of right at the nexus of this stuff, in touch with the people who were doing the most important stuff. So whenever we talk about haiku, first thing we have to do is empty our teacup, as they say. Some of you may be familiar with the story about the guy who goes to the Zen master and says, "Please teach me Zen." And the Zen master, he's gone into the master's little cottage or hut. And the master says, "Sure, teaching you Zen, easiest thing in the world, but first let's have a nice cup of tea." And he brews up the tea, and he starts filling the guy's cup, and it gets filled up, and then he keeps pouring, and the tea is starting to overflow onto the tray and the table, making a terrible mess. And finally the guy says, "Stop, you can't get anything more in there." And the Roshi, the Zen master, says, "Right." He says, "Exactly." He says, "Now this cup is your mind, right? If you want me to show you Zen, you want me to fill your cup, first you have to empty your mind. You have to empty, because otherwise you're coming in with all your preconceptions, you're coming in with all your ideas, and you're going to be filtering everything I say through that. And if your old concepts were doing you any good, you wouldn't be here." So, and that's always good advice going into anything, especially anything related to Dharma awakening. So specifically with regard to haiku, there are certain things, if you studied haiku in school, there's certain things everyone knows about haiku, and they're all wrong. Okay. For instance, everyone knows, haiku have to be 17 syllables, right? A lot of people never get past that, and they post. Sometimes they send them to me, right? And they just figure, what is it? Hai- Haiku are easy, but sometimes they don't make sense. Refrigerator. I mean, that's just making fun of that idea. But a lot of people think, okay, it's this kind of cookie cutter thing. If you can fit an idea into 17 syllables, there's something magical about that. You've created a haiku. Okay, so that 17 syllable thing is all wrong. First of all, that's based on Japanese. Japanese is a much more discursive language than English. It takes many more syllables to say the same thing in Japanese as it does in English. That's even true of, say, Spanish. If you ever notice, like the bilingual signs and instructions on things, or recipes, whatever, the Spanish is always about 25% or so longer than the English. Same thing with Japanese. So 17 syllables is too much in English. And for that matter, what's they're actually the formal, traditional haiku in Japanese, what they're counting there is not strictly syllables. I forget there's the Japanese word for it, but it's closer to what we would call phonemes, which are smaller sound groups than syllables. So the bottom line is, if you're writing 17 syllables, A, it's probably too long. B, you probably wind up creating something that very unnatural in order to shoehorn it into the 17 syllables, which is what my students would always start off by doing. And that's exactly the opposite of the spirit of haiku. The spirit of haiku is complete naturalness and completely of a piece with the naturalness of the kind of meditation we do. Just being a good haiku should sound like and look like and feel like it just fell off the tree, like no one made it. Okay, so forget about 17 syllables. If you're and you'll see some of these modern haiku writers, the writing haiku in English, they'll make 17 syllable haiku. Most of them don't. For most people, that would be as bad as when your English teacher made you write a sonnet, and the whole thing was fitting your idea into the 14 lines, and it's a good way to get kids to hate poetry, usually. Unless you're a weirdo like I was, and you love that. So 17 syllables, forget about it. What's the and then also, it's about nature. So my kids would start by writing something like, in the springtime. That's only 4 syllables. In sweet spring, in the sweet springtime, or in lovely springtime. There we go, 5 syllables. We're good. In lovely springtime. It's supposed to be about nature. Nature is beautiful. It's only nature is so beautiful. 7. It makes my heart sing. Right? Okay, what is it? In lovely springtime, nature is so beautiful, it makes my heart sing. There we go. It's about nature. 17 syllables. It's perfect, except that it sucks. All right? Why does it suck so badly? All right? It sucks badly because it's trying to convey an idea. It's a concept. It's an idea. It's not an experience. Right? So long when you're just conveying an idea, a concept, that's coming from the mind, coming from the thinking mind. And it's great having these minds that can think thoughts, but the problem with thinking thoughts is that you can think up any bullshit and think up, and it doesn't have to necessarily have to do with anything real, anything felt, anything experienced. And besides, it's that's what all that lovely, right? Adjectives are immediately suspect, because adjectives, you can say lovely. How do we know it's lovely? What did you experience? I would say to my students, what did you experience that led you to the conclusion that the thing is lovely? Right? Now, maybe there was no such experience. Maybe you're just blowing smoke, in which case this has been a useful exercise. You've discovered that you're blowing smoke, right? Discovering that is half the battle, and you can see when you stop doing that what's left. Or if there really is an experience, something that's been experienced that's leading you to feel that it's lovely, what is that experience? Fine, give me that experience. And then let me conclude that it's lovely. Okay? You hear what I'm saying? And by the way, you may recognize this spirit not only in haiku, but in a lot of modern writing that's been influenced by the spirit of haiku. For instance, this is Hemingway, right? Gertrude Stein before him, and then Ezra Pound and Hemingway, where Hemingway at his best, doesn't tell you what anyone's feeling, he gives you the experience moment by moment by moment. Okay? That brings us to the next point. Moment. Haiku gives you a moment. In lovely springtime, how long is that? That's 3 months. That's way too long. We don't have experience in 3 months. All our experience is in moments. So if you're going to give us a real experience, first you have to perceive the experience yourself. And then you take like a snapshot of it. And then you share it with us. And maybe it's of what we usually call nature, outdoors. That's great. That's great because there we're bereft of a lot of, human-made stuff that usually clutters up our mind. But also, and especially this is true of modern haiku, nature is everything, really. Nature is everywhere, including human nature. So a lot of modern haiku will include, it could be in an urban setting. It could be in a very human situation. It could be in a sexual situation, as you'll see several of them in this book are that. It can be funny. But the main thing is that it's real. It's not an idea, not an abstraction. It's a moment of time, a moment of experience. And generally speaking, an ordinary moment. People generally, they want to, when they start writing or painting, taking photos, they want to take photos or paint about or write about, whatever is the most extraordinary, the most, right? But haiku, in its wisdom, does the opposite. Looks at what's the most ordinary. Because what's the whole point? What's the point of haiku? What's the point of meditation? It's to reveal the infinite. It's to reveal Buddha nature. And Buddha nature is everything. It's everywhere. But in particular, it's significant to find it in the most ordinary of places. So I think 1 or 2 or 3 of you were on our meditation. I think it was our meditation just this past Thursday evening. We were talking about the famous Mondo, the famous Zen teaching tale, where the monk asks the Roshi, what is the Buddha? Right? Not who is the Buddha, what is the Buddha? In other words, what is enlightenment? What is ultimate truth? And the answer is the Buddha is a pile of cow shit in the middle of the road. Right? It's everything else, but if you can see it in the cow shit, you can see it everywhere. Yeah, Tova?
Can I ask?
Tova, please.
Yeah, the school you taught, wasn't it a Christian school?
Wait, I'm sorry. Say this again.
The school, the high school that you taught in.
Oh.
Wasn't it a Christian school?
No, Pingree School.
Pingree wasn't a Christian school?
No.
I mean, I'm leading to the main question, which is, did you talk to the students about Buddha nature, or is there some synonym, some other way of saying it to people who are not Buddhists?
Right. And the answer is yes and yes. I would use both kinds of language. What I did where I taught at Pingree, and Pingree was a private school where you actually have more freedom than in public schools generally, because you're not answerable to school boards and not so much to parents and so forth. And the parents are paying so much money that they figure the teachers must know what they're doing, right? But what I generally did at Pingree, and you know what, it's the same thing I always do, which is I always try to, like a juggler, keep a few, 3, 4, 5 balls in the air. So I'll use different terminology. I'll say Buddha nature, but I'll also say pure beingness. I'll say infinite okayness. I'll say, if it's a group I've been with for a while and I know we're all relaxed, I'll say God. And, and we have the time and the space to make it clear that, when we say God, we're not talking about a big man in the sky who gets angry a lot. We're talking about Buddha nature, right? As Jesus was, by the way, when he talked about God. And Tova, we've talked about this before, when God, quote unquote, when Moses asked God, what's your name? He didn't say, he didn't really say the Lord, a big male patriarchal anthropomorphic thing. He said, right, I am that I am, right? Beingness, 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 etc. Beingness rolling along, manifesting as everything that bees. So this is really what a good haiku will do, is it'll show you just one drop of just ordinary existence, and there's infinite beingness in it. Now, and the Zen term, specifically the Zen term for that kind of moment, is kensho. It's if you're interested, Kensho, kensho. That's easy to remember because it's like the Buddha nature showing itself, right? Or entering your ken. If you know, that's an old-fashioned English word. Your ken, your field of, your scope of knowing. You bet. Good. Anything else? Any other questions or comments before we
Um,
go on?
I,
Yeah,
I,
Lisa, please.
I have of the haiku and the poetry that I've heard you refer to, and the little that I've read. The reason why I'm so drawn to it is that so much of our communication is analytic. It's kind of object oriented, and how
I'm,
we
I'm, I'm
communicate.
sorry. I'm sorry. What is it that's analytic and
Uh,
object
uh,
oriented?
our communication.
Ah, okay. I just
You
missed
know,
that phrase.
we're trying to get a point across.
Right.
And to when I really break down communication, we each have such a unique way of engaging that it's a miracle that we understand each other. So what I value so much about poetry and the haiku is that, and painting and art, is the individual, there's an intention, there's this act, and then the experience is whatever it'll be. There's no implied necessity that it be any one way. No, so there's it's implied that it will be a subjective experience for the person reading, the person viewing, the person, and that to me is so liberating.
Yeah.
Because if I try and tell you something that is, this is how I saw it and this is why it no, so the haiku and the poetry is a language to me that is so rich, that doesn't impose on people a way to view
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I find that really rich.
And in that sense, it is very much in the spirit of meditation. in that it's a liberation from being stuck on that level of literalness and and objectivity and trying to get it right and wait, what are we saying here, and just of letting go into a field of bigger possibility, and where it's just the experience is coming to us. We're not trying to make meaning. We're actually, if we're both in meditation and in reading haiku, and when we really get there and writing haiku, rather than trying to make meaning, we're allowing something else, something bigger, a bigger experience to carry us beyond meaning. Sometimes it's likened to taking a pebble and throwing it onto the surface of a still pond, right? And the ripples go out and out and out. The ripples of implication, the ripples of experience. And some people are going to focus on, oh, that ripple there, some of that, and and one that's really, really good. The deeper you get into it, the wider the ripples go.
Mm.
Ultimately they cover the whole pond, which is the whole universe is there in the the wet leaf in after the spring rain or whatever it is. Good. Anything else before we go ahead? Okay, so let us let's see. Okay, let's go to, if you've got the book, page 76, page 76 if you have the book. If you don't worry about it. I'll read slowly. Haiku have to be read slowly. The rule is you read them slowly. You always read them twice. That's the tradition. You always read it twice. And also notice how nicely this book is printed. There's plenty of white space around them. You always have to print them with lots of white space around them, and you always have to read them in such a way that we can feel the white space around them, because that's the silence. The silence is what we're evoking, right? We're using the sound. We're using just like the pebble evoking the ripples, right? So, wet snow, another color or two on the sycamore boughs. Wet snow, another color or two on the sycamore boughs. Okay, talk to me. What are you getting from this? First, one thing very, very kind of elementary. What's the season? Right, obviously winter. Now, haiku traditionally, it's always clear what season it is. There's summer haiku and winter haiku, spring haiku, fall haiku. Traditional Japanese haiku, there's always a word or a phrase in there that lets us know, or an image that lets us know what the season is. Now, modern haiku, which can also be more urban and more indoors, that's not always the case. But can you see traditionally why, evoking the season automatically connects us to the bigger world, connects us to the natural world. So already the ripples are starting to go out. Okay. Also, just let me point out one more technical thing here that I did not mention. Notice all of these on these 2 pages are written all in lowercase letters and with a minimum of punctuation. And that's traditional, and so that's another thing to bear in mind when you start writing your haiku. right? And can you see, can you feel why you would stick to lowercase letters?
Well, it doesn't lend itself to being an object.
Say it again, Bob.
It doesn't lend itself to being an object.
Yeah, yeah. When we capitalize things, and there's lots of lots of languages that never have had capital letters. You know, that's a thing. If you speak English or any other language that uses the Roman alphabet, we kind of take that for granted that there's the big letters and the little letters. Lots of alphabets, lots of languages have never had those. Sanskrit doesn't have them, right? And interestingly enough, in German, I don't think I don't know if they still do this, but in German they used to capitalize all the nouns. Does anyone here speak German or read German? I don't know if they still do that, but if you read a lot of stuff in English, not that long ago, like if you read, when you read Thoreau and Emerson, right, that's just the 1830s, 40s, 50s, they still do that a lot of the time. They capitalize the nouns. So, right, it's like, oh, this is something solid, this is real, this is right, in a way that other stuff is not. Whereas, yeah, Lisa?
Dean, I think German does still. Here's a book of Rilke's, Rainer Maria Rilke, with the German. And I spoke German when I was in kindergarten.
Ah,
I've forgotten it, but all of the nouns are capitalized.
right, there you go. Thank you. Thank you. I was actually just dealing with this issue in the book that I'm working on now, because I had to deal with, you may have noticed there's a new, what's becoming a new standard, which is when you're referring to black people, to capitalize the B. The idea being, that, it's showing respect, dignity, the cultural heritage, and so forth. But then it becomes a head scratcher. Well, now do we capitalize white? All right. And actually, the Chicago Manual of Style now recommends to capitalize the B in black, and they're kind of semi-recommending to do white. And so there's this beautiful intention, and I can't say, I'm not qualified to say if overall this is a good idea or not a good idea, but just as a Dharma exponent, what I would point out is that to capitalize any word that we use to refer to ourselves, such as Dean or Bob or Lisa, it tends to reinforce the idea that this is what I ultimately am, right? This is my ultimate identity. So it's called reification. Reification, taking that which is not necessarily a thing and turning it into a thing, an irreducible thing, right? Reification literally means thingification, right? So in haiku, we don't want to make those distinctions. We want to have everything, and everything's more understated. Capital letters tend to shout a little bit. This way we have a much more democratic kind of understatement, and and also it's less cluttered. This is the other idea of the punctuation. Again, you'll see this in Hemingway. You can read chapters and chapters of Hemingway and never see a semicolon, right? The semicolon is the one that tells people you've been to college. Right? It's not good for much anything else. And so the plainest, most understated everything possible. And this is also in harmony with, because there is this closeness between haiku, the spirit of haiku, and Zen, historically. You walk into a Zen temple, and it's like you've walked into a shaker house, right? Everything is completely plain. It's like, what you're seeing behind me here. It's just wood, plain, no ornamentation. You'll never see an image of the Buddha anywhere. Nothing. You know, whereas you walk into a Tibetan Buddhist temple, and it's like, you know, it's like a Catholic church on steroids. You know, it's gods and deities and colors, and it's not that one is better or worse. They're just different styles, different approaches, different pathways to the infinite. And this is the path of plainness. So wet snow, another color or two on the sycamore boughs. So the only punctuation mark there is a dash. And the next page, there's 4 haiku, and of the 4 there's only 1 punctuation mark, which is also a dash. The 2 favorite punctuation marks for haiku in English are the dash and the colon. The dash and the colon. And usually they'll be setting off either the first line from the other 2 or the third line from the other 2. You know, because it gives a beat. It gives a beat before the reveal, before the kensho, if all goes well, happens. Okay?
Dean?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so what immediately came to mind was that how else do you tell that snow is wet, then it's a different color than snow that's not wet?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to me, this is kind of the big
That explains why there's a color or two.
yeah. This is the big reveal. This is the essence of this particular haiku. What I'm getting anyway is, oh, I just thought snow was white. Right? I just thought, wait a minute, snow can be in different colors? We mentioned Thoreau a couple of minutes ago. There's a great thing in Walden, the chapter in Walden, The Pond in Winter, and he describes the crews that come and harvest ice. They carve out these big blocks of ice and pack them up, and they put them on trains because the railroad was the new thing, and they pack them in straw, and they ship them down to the south. This is something you could do now. This is a new industry based on the new technology. So that people down in Georgia could, you know, have ice in their ice boxes or in their drinks or whatever. But he describes it, and he goes on for several sentences, as I recall, about all the different colors of ice that you encounter just at Walden Pond. And that's, I'll never forget reading that for the first time. I thought, wait, ice has color? I didn't know that. And he says, yeah, this is the blue ice here and the green ice here. So what's going on here with the colors? Wet snow, another color or two on the sycamore boughs.
That's what I love about poetry. It is
Yep.
so subjective.
Mhm.
Because my sense is wet snow. It's melting. And as it melts on the sycamore tree, the colors of the sycamore tree emerge.
Ah,
So there was movement in it. It was so interesting. Wet snow,
Right.
another color or two emerging in the
yeah,
sycamore boughs. you
yeah.
know?
And of course, it's winter, so the sycamore tree is probably leafless, right? We think of it as being, oh, it's as if dead now. It's resting. There's nothing going. No, you know, come back in spring or summer, we'll see color here. But no, look more closely. Here's winter. Here is the time. Here is the temperature. Here's the condition that we think of where things are bereft of color, bereft of life. But in fact, it's bringing out, by wetting the bark, it's bringing out those colors. Thank you, Lisa.
Poetry, it's wonderful.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So it's actually not about the wet snow, it's about the bark.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
wet.
yeah. I think I wasn't seeing it that way till Lisa tugged my coat to it. That's what working for me now. Maybe
But
if we
it
come
could
back,
be snow.
it could be. And maybe if we come back next
Oh.
week, maybe if we come back, look at it again next week, we'll see something else as the ripples go out and out.
I was seeing the bark also.
Say it again, Liliana.
I was also seeing the bark. I wasn't seeing the snow. I was seeing
Yeah.
change on the bark.
Yeah. That's what we're saying now. That it's the change on the bark, the leafless bark and the twigs how the wet, the water of the melting snow, darkens it and brings out the color. So, I mean, to me, this is like the resurrection, right? Everything that in the Christian tradition, the resurrection, that in what looks to the outsiders like death is really the revelation of eternal life, right? Same thing, only without capital letters, so to speak, and without setting it in terms of extraordinary terms. Here was this one guy 2,000 years ago, and the only one. Instead, showing, oh, this is what's going on everywhere all the time. Everywhere all the time is the resurrection and the crucifixion.
So how far can one take that metaphor? Because what you just say, where I go with it now, a tree of life, been frozen, kind of like we're frozen in our conditioning. And as all of that starts to melt and change, because we all have these seasons when we kind of get frozen or asleep, to use another metaphor. And then as that season changes and we start to thaw and we become more sensitive, there's the tree. That's the resurrection.
Yeah. So on that level, there you go. What's being resurrected is our consciousness. Is our, it was killed, it was frozen in the limitations of conditioning and all the situations that seem so pinching of suffering and so forth, and now the freedom from that. That's enlightenment. So yeah. So yes, you asked the question, how far can we go with this? And the answer is all the way. And a really good haiku will always give us the opportunity to go all the way. Okay, I want to let me see if I can find it. One of my very favorite things. Okay, here's one, page 86. Distant thunder, dash. Okay. Distant thunder. The dog's toenails click against the linoleum. Distant thunder. The dog's toenails click against the linoleum. Cynthia, you're laughing. Talk to us. You have to unmute yourself. There you go. Mm-hmm.
I think it's particularly modern, and it actually brought me to my kitchen where, as I mentioned to you earlier, we had lines of storm and tornadoes a few nights ago, and it's very relatable. I'm enjoying it. Thank you.
No. I thought of this. I thought of you as soon as I read this, watching the tornado. So you didn't get hit by a tornado. So, what else? What's going on here? Let's start.
It could be shows the subjectivity of sounds. That for some, this person can hear the click of a dog's toenail like a clap of thunder.
Yeah, so there's the two sounds going on. And this is a very, very common thing in haiku, to have something that's great, great big and something that's very small, or something that's distant and something that's very near. Because by working those dualities, those polarities, and making them both part of the same moment, both part of the same experience, right? It's in a sense showing the non-duality, the non-separateness of the big and the little, the near and the far, and everything in between by implication.
And something that's terrifying, potentially terrifying,
Yep.
and something that's very familiar and
And
very
something
endearing.
familiar and endearing, and yes, absolutely. And even the quality of the sounds, right? The thunder that's coming out of the subwoofers, and the click of the toenails that's coming out of the tweeter, right?
Yes.
And
Speaking of that,
Yes.
I was thinking that the sound, I mean, I like Bob saying the subjectivity, because when you think about the sound of dog toenails on a floor, it almost sounds like rain on a roof. And so I was thinking, is it just sort of saying that the sounds could be one thing, could be another, and this is all near and far and experience,
yeah,
and how
Yeah.
we hear it, how we perceive it.
yeah, because we've talked about this before in our meditation sessions, and those of you who've spent time with Rupert Spira in his teachings are very familiar with this. That no experience is near or far. When we say, "Oh, I hear the dog barking across the street," is that experience happening across the street? Right? Where is it happening? It's happening in our awareness, which is where all experience happens. So in that sense, it's all part of the one thing. Now, in terms of let me start again. Why do we suddenly hear the clicking of the dog's toenails apparently right after the thunder? In terms of the plot, the simple narrative here, what's going on?
To me, it immediately brought the scene to like a living room, someone in complete silence. It brought the silence and a gray color and aloneness, again, in the country, perhaps. So,
Yeah. And maybe the narrator or the poet is in the living room. Where's the dog?
right behind him. Right.
Hey, is it a kitchen? Is it a kitchen? Or
Yeah, the dog's in the kitchen because it's
Okay.
linoleum.
Uh,
Okay? I mean, seems to me, right? Seems to me the dog's got to be in the kitchen, the linoleum. So therefore, do we see the dog? No, the dog's invisible, just like the thunder. Just more invisible sound. Is there any particular reason why maybe we didn't hear the dog before? Maybe the dog was not on the move before, and now suddenly the dog is on the move.
He's afraid of the thunder.
Yes. Yes. He's afraid of the thunder. In the next moment, he's going to come into the living room and jump in the poet's lap and whimper, and, has to be told that everything's okay. Is everything okay?
Or because he's in the kitchen is often the heart of the home.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, that's the safe place.
Yeah. Yeah. Could be. Could be.
the writer could be in the kitchen, right? Like kind of like a country kitchen,
Yeah.
a big space.
Yeah. Could be. Could be. I'm 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 guessing, and we can't know, but I would bet money that in this case, particularly the fact that what we're being presented with is the sound of the toenails, not seeing. I think if we were in the kitchen with the dog, we probably would not hear it as clearly because part of our attention would, we'd be seeing the sight of the dog crossing the kitchen to, lick our hand or ask to be petted or whatever it was. And to me, there's something, anyway, this is my take. There's something, there's something very poignant about the dog and knowing that the dog's going to come to me to be comforted. Somehow the dog scared by the thunder is in the other end of the house and is going to bother to make the trip across the house because the dog knows that I'm the one that can say, be at peace, my child, all things are well. Right? In other words, the dog has elected us Buddha. Right? There's a bumper sticker I saw once that said, "Dear God, please make me the person my dog thinks I am." And that's what I'm getting here. But again, at least as you said, a little while ago, we can just keep getting deeper and deeper into these. If they're good, there's no bottom to them. But to me, when it starts taking us in a direction where, oh, now we're finding the Buddha in the pile of cow shit, then it feels like a right direction. Not necessarily the right direction, but a right direction.
It's true too. When I think of thunder, it's something huge and majestic and terrifying and magnificent. And I'm not seeing the lightning, I'm just hearing the thunder.
Mm-hmm.
And what is more instinctive and familiar than a dog?
Yeah.
That dog is just going to be, the instinct is that thunder. The thing that we're the most afraid of is a loud noise.
Yeah.
So just the juxtaposition of those, and like you say, the fact that you don't see the dog, you just hear it. So
Yeah.
it exists just in a felt sense through sound.
Yeah. 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 And what you were saying just now may also put me to mind that, again, in the Zen tradition, one of the classic koans, one of the classic meditative riddles is, does the dog have Buddha nature? Right? Right? Is the dog also a reflection of embodiment of the boundless awareness? Right? So in a sense, we could read this haiku as a contemplation of that koan. Here's the magnificence, as you say, the bigness of the thunder, and then it gets, as it were, invested in, made sonically non-separate from the smallest, most tippy-toest part of the dog. Not only does the dog have Buddha nature, the dog's little tippy-toe claws or toenails have Buddha nature. I also like this one because it makes the long word linoleum work, right? And usually in haiku, you avoid long words. If there's a long word and a short word for the same thing, the rule is, in most writing, unless there's some particular reason to use the long word, you use the short word. And this is a particularly an issue in the English language more than most others, because we have, as some of you know, two main source languages, right? English comes first from the Germanic side, right? We come from Old Germanic and then Old English, which is all, mostly it's a very blunt, monosyllabic words. You know, dog, sky, earth, fire, blood, guts, piss, shit, right? And words like piss and shit and fuck there was nothing dirty about them, nothing obscene about them. They were the only words there were for those objects or those experiences. Then in 1066, right, William the Conqueror, note that William, that's a French name, Guillaume, right? William the Conqueror comes in 1066, so, right, and they take over, and basically the court now is French. And so all our words in English, by the way, for most of our words for the government, the military, all these things that got organized after William the Conqueror, they're all French words, right? What do you have in the courtroom? The défendant, le plaintif, right? And what do you have in the military? Corporal, général, right? It's mostly French. And just in our general lexicon, we now get a French word, a French-derived word for everything gets mixed into the English. So you can say guts or you can say intestines, right? You can use the Anglo-Saxon word or you can use the Norman word, the French word. And what happens when people go to school, they try to look smart, and intuitively they think the way to do that is to write with all the French-derived words. And that's how all that, one of the ways that all that really crappy writing happens that people do in school, right? You'll see this whenever you see a chief of police making a report. There was a shooting somewhere, or so, and you'd think, oh, cops, they're earthy guys. They'll use the Anglo-Saxon words. They do the opposite. They'll say the individual exited the vehicle. They'll never say the guy left the car, right? And this is what's going on with a whole lot of literature in the English language until you start to get Mark Twain, who brings in conversational English, making it into literature, you know, in Huckleberry Finn, and then you get to Gertrude Stein, and then, you know, going all the way, you get Hemingway, who turns the clock back to 1065, basically just purges his language of all those French-derived words. It's like, okay, if I express the stuff in just Anglo-Saxon words, rock, earth, man, woman, it's just, there's fewer syllables to get between the word and the thing, right? The words are more like, you know, like rocks, right? Guts is more like gut. Intestine is just more abstract, right? And then also, of course, because, you know, piss is a perfect word, it's a perfect poem. It even sounds like pissing, right? But then, you know, the Frenchies bring in, you know, urination. And then if you're in court, right, which word are you going to use? You're going to use the word that the nobles are used to using, which is the French word, so that the association starts to be, oh, all those words like, you know, like piss and shit and so forth, that's peasant words. Words for people who work in the earth, who work in the dirt, and there's just one more step to, oh, those are dirty words, words that are not for use in polite society. So in case you were wondering where we get the concept of dirty words, this is how it happens. So basically haiku most of the time, unless there's some particular reason to do it, you're using the Anglo-Saxon words. And it's usually a pretty good rule in your writing generally, as some of you know. So we're about out of time here. Yes, we are.
My
Yes.
takeaway then is haiku, the poetry of dirty language.
In the very best sense. So here's what I want to suggest.
Sorry, can you repeat about the origin of dirty language? What did you say?
You know what? I'm going to post this on my YouTube channel, so you can go back and listen to this last bit again, because I want to let people go here. So what I want to suggest, we can play with these for a long time. There's just so much good material here. So what I would like to suggest is, if you don't have the book yet, if you have the book, take some time. You have a real good sense of how you read this stuff, and find ones that really talk to you, and stick little bookmarks in, so next time you can bring those up. And either the ones that you get, oh yeah, I see what's ooh, this is really working for me, or if there's ones that really make you scratch your head, what the hell's going on here? Either way, great. Bring it up so you all can make the agenda next Sunday. And if you feel so moved, start looking around for haiku moments in your own life and jotting them down. This is where it really gets to be fun. You know, if you can write one good haiku in the next 7 days, you got something going on there. So maybe we'll see what happens. If people are so moved, maybe we wind up, workshopping our own fresh haiku right off the press here. Okay? So thank you all so much.
Thank you. It was a great, great time.
Good.
Loved it.
May
Thank
all beings swiftly realize their Buddha nature, no matter how much their lives may appear to resemble cow shit. See ya.
Thanks,
Bye.
Bye.